Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Major League Baseball did not even make it a week before they had to cancel a game because of a coronavirus outbreak in their midst. And whether you're a baseball fan or not, the story of what happened is the story of America's utter failure to deal with this pandemic that has killed nearly 150,000 of our fellow Americans. You might remember that back on March 11th, right? We had not quite shut down states yet. Lots of school systems were still open. And there was supposed to be a regular season basketball game between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Utah Jazz. Fans were in the stands. The game was about to start. And right before the tip-off, one of the Jazz players tested positive and the game was canceled. Later that night, the season was postponed indefinitely. And then that same day, actor Tom Hanks announced he had the virus. And then the nation basically shut down and the before times were over. 4 months later, we have not had sports for an obvious reason. You cannot safely crowd thousands of people, not to mention the competing athletes together, and watch a game in the midst of the pandemic. But Major League Baseball and the NBA and the NFL and all these other sports leagues have a lot of money on the line. I mean, they have every single financial incentive to figure out a way to play and broadcast what their play is and to play safely. And so for months, these sports leagues have tried to figure out a way to make it work with various plans. The NBA announced a plan to resume their season in an isolated zone in Orlando called the Bubble. The National Hockey League has also announced a similar plan. And so the Major League Baseball worked on a plan of their own. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred telling the New York Times, "We cannot be the one sport that doesn't figure out how to play." The league created all sorts of protocols to make it work. They tried to cut down on travel, so there's a reduced travel schedule. There are, of course, no fans in the stands. It's bizarre to watch a game under those conditions. In fact, they're piping in crowd noise to sort of give you the sense that there are people cheering. Here's the Pittsburgh Pirates manager arguing with the umpire while both men wear masks. Look at that, putting it on to get down there. Here's Chicago Cubs first baseman Anthony Rizzo jokingly giving the Milwaukee Brewers runner hand sanitizer. Crucially, the Major League Baseball has been testing all the time, and not just testing. They're getting results within 2 days, unlike the rest of America, where it's often taking 2 weeks. The league has nearly limitless resources and every single incentive to figure out how to play safely and give fans sitting at home a product they can make money off of. But with less than a week, 1 week into the season, 2 games are postponed tonight. Because as of now, over a dozen, yes, you heard that correctly, over a dozen Miami Marlins players and staff members have tested positive. The Athletic reports the Marlins played a game in Philadelphia against the Phillies. Despite having 3 players learn Sunday they tested positive for COVID-19 just 2 days after a 4th player learned of a positive test on Friday. And then earlier today, the Marlins learned at least 7 more players and 2 coaches tested positive. So now this team is stuck in Philadelphia quarantining. The Philadelphia Inquirer reports that with some players just having tested positive and with some waiting for their test results, the players decided to vote by group text message to play the next day. Team officials or league officials probably should have stepped in to make that call, don't you think? But that's sort of par for the course with the American response. I mean, the lack of guidance here is like Texas Governor Greg Abbott opening up the bars in his state and then chastising people for going to bars. Look, whether you like baseball or not, whether you care about sports or not, this is a business that has everything going for it, every resource it needs, every incentive to open safely. And their plan has basically not survived first contact with the virus. And the reason for that is that they're trying to pull this off in a country with a raging outbreak. I mean, heck, the White House, the most tested workplace in the country, with the resources of the entire federal government, keeps having people test positive. Today, it was National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, the highest-ranking administration official to date. This is the fundamental problem we have been discussing for months. You cannot play a game of catch in the middle of a forest fire, at least not for very long. The epidemic is not under control in the U.S., and any attempt, no matter how well researched, how ingenious, to create a facsimile of normalcy amidst it is very likely to fail unless the epidemic is controlled. This is not just a story about baseball. This is a story about what is happening across the country. I mean, Major League Baseball went through a planning process not that dissimilar to what my kid's school is going through right now, only with orders of magnitude more resources at their disposal and a significantly smaller population to deal with than, say, New York City public schools. And baseball already has a problem on its hands. What do you think is going to happen when people try to go back to work in the fall in large office buildings or big urban school districts, especially under-resourced school districts, where they're not going to have access to testing? A place where, say, a bunch of teachers could get tested, and still not know for 7 to 10 days. And that's not even to mention all the other disaster areas we already know about: county jails, state and federal prisons, ICE detention facilities, nursing homes. Here's the thing. It is not impossible to contain the virus. It is quite possible, actually. Other countries have done a much better job. But it is not possible to ignore the virus and then come out with some plan to get out there and play ball. Pretend you can have a normal life as the virus rages across the country. Here's what Washington Nationals pitcher Sean Doolittle said about it earlier this month.
We're trying to bring baseball back during a pandemic that's killed 130,000 people. We're way worse off as a country than where we were in March when we shut this thing down. And look at where other developed countries are in their response to this. We haven't done any of the things that other countries have done to bring sports back. Sports are like the reward of a functioning society, a functional society. We can't just have virus fatigue and think it's been it's been 4 months, we're over it. This has been enough time, right? We've waited long enough. Shouldn't sports come back now? No, there's things we have to do in order to bring the stuff back.
That's as good a 40 seconds on the American response to virus as I've heard from anyone. Sports are a reward for a functional society. That is right. Because if you take the right steps, you can have things like baseball. Let's look at South Korea. They had their first case of coronavirus the very same day we had our first confirmed case. And South Korea worked fast to deploy an overwhelming force to suppress the virus. They shut down their society and they contact traced relentlessly. And they have had around 300 deaths total. Fewer coronavirus deaths in 4 months than the U.S. has every single day for months stretching out into the future. That is what success looks like. And that is why yesterday, South Korean baseball fans were able to attend games in person. Well, the American baseball season hangs